Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. There were a few technical difficulties that we're still working through. Um, so at this moment, I do have Jill Sherman that will be presenting, but I wanted to see if people could hear us. On my end, am having issues hearing, and I just want to make sure that everyone else can hear Jill. If you could type in your response into the chat, that would be helpful. I don't see any responses, but I could try to move through this with the slides, Jill. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, I've got 2 responses that we can't hear you, Jill. And I think maybe it has something to do with the mode of communication. I believe Jill's using her phone. We lost Jill. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we work through this. I have a presentation ready. We're just working through her sound quality. Let me see if I can call her and perhaps we can put my phone or something near my speakers. Maybe that'll help. I'll be back. Okay, so I have her on my phone, so hopefully people can hear, and I would be really appreciative if you could say yay or nay. So, Jill, you are on speaker.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Can everybody in this session hear Jill? Jill, please speak.
Can you hear me when I'm talking, people? Apologize. They can't hear me?
I'm waiting for someone to respond, yay or nay.
Can you hear me when I'm talking? Can you hear me when I'm talking? I can hear me.
I'm going to type in the chat. Does this work? I know this isn't the best remedy. Yes! I got yes. Yes.
Yay.
Yeah. Okay. So we got Jill.
All right, let's get started.
Okay.
So sorry. I will try to speed through this.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen.
I have a lot of slides.
Okay. I have your first slide, Jill.
Great.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about clean mobility and our future. And I'm going to talk about Access Clean California. Next slide. So today we're going to talk a little bit about California and a just transition, which is the new buzzword out there. Mobility justice and clean transportation. Making the transition for me and my community and making our voices heard. Next slide. So we're going to learn about how the state is addressing environmental injustice. Next slide. As you may know, California is trying to reach 100% zero emissions energy sources by the year 2045. So that is a 34% less than in 2018. We're also trying to, as a state, reduce CO2 emissions by 40% by the year 2030. Next slide. Transition is inevitable, but justice is not. Justice transition is a framework for a fair shift to an economy that is ecologically sustainable, equitable, and just for all of its members. California is transitioning to clean energy, and we need to make sure that it is done in a way that includes and benefits tribal communities. Next one. So let's look at the definition. Environmental justice in California is this definition was adopted in 1999, and it is the fair treatment of people of all races, cultures, and incomes with respect to the development, adoption, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws and regulations and policies. The Cal EnviroScreen was first published in 2013 to measure and map a cumulative impact of injustice. And I have to say this. The California EnviroScreen does not adequately acknowledge issues within the tribal community. And this is where we have to speak up. I have said this to different people. If you are with tribes, you know that some of the grant programs ask us to utilize California EnviroScreen to document our need. And I believe there's a racial injustice in inequity that exists within California EnviroScreen, even though I'm going to talk about it today. So next slide. So what does California EnviroScreen do? And it's a website you can go to, and you can look at how air pollution, pesticides, traffic, housing, unemployment, all these indicators are supposed to be listed. Next slide. So when I talk about injustice, you see the state of California, and the orange reddish color is the areas of the highest impact. And on the slide on the right of that, I have the tribal communities that I, snipped and pasted into this. And you can see that it looks like, hey, we're all doing great, right? And this is what I'm talking about in terms of environmental injustice being perpetrated by California EnviroScreen. Next slide, please. So this is the first year that supposedly the California EnviroScreen is looking at race and ethnicity to see how different ethnic groups are impacted. And so you can see that the what they have here is by level. So obviously Caucasians are affected the least for the most part, depending on where they live. And then of course we have everybody else who's impacted at a higher level. Next slide. And what this really means, and again, getting back to tribes being into those green, healthy areas, supposedly, according to EnviroScreen. But basically, pollution impacts us whether we know it or not. So, air pollution contributes to asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and dementia. And you can see where they have looked at this and said Black Americans have nearly 1.5 times more likely to have asthma, and then so forth. What I should have included here is that for the Indian Health Service, according to their data, it shows one of the largest reasons, like 80% of the reasons people go to the doctor, natives go to the doctor in an IHA system, is because of upper respiratory conditions. So we're not even on this little thing. Again, showing there's some racial inequities being perpetrated by California EnviroScreen. Next slide, please. So the state implemented a cap and trade in 2013, which is a market-based strategy to reduce pollution. And companies have an allowance for every ton of emissions that they produce. There is a limited and a declining number of allowances, and so the state holds an annual auction where companies can buy and sell these allowances. And those revenues from those auctions are used to fund programs to reduce emissions, which is what we're going to talk about in terms of the California climate investments, which include the clean vehicle incentives. Next slide. So from the cap and trade, there have been $8.3 billion spent for programs in California for clean transportation, clean energy, energy efficiency, community sustainability, natural resources, and waste. And these are distributed through different state agencies. Next slide. So one of the state agencies is the California Air Resources Board has funded many different programs. And then there's another program called Shared Mobility, which has programs that tribes are also eligible for. So funding environmental justice programs. SB 535 that was enacted in 2012, 20% of the climate money must go to disadvantaged communities, which is the top 25% of California EnviroScreen. But keep in mind, gotta say this again, there's a racial injustice when it comes to Native American communities and how they're identified in the California EnviroScreen process. But we need more people than just me saying that to the people. I have spent hours trying to communicate with the Cal EnviroScreen people, and I got one phone call back. He said, yeah, let's meet sometime and talk about that. Okay, well, that was a long time ago. That was last year. AB 1550, which was enacted in 2016, allowed for an additional additional 10% for low-income households and communities. So a minimum of all the money that the state has that a state is receiving from cap and trade, a minimum of 35% must go to low-income and disadvantaged communities. And people are making money off of this, which is really sad, because low-income communities have the potential to be taken advantage of, in my opinion. And then the other thing I want you to remember is the minimum is not a maximum, but tribes have to argue for access to these funds, and somebody should be watching that we have access. Next slide. So here is like a hodgepodge of pictures showing what the funds are going for. Clean energy buses, charging stations, solid waste, solar, drinking water. Next slide. Lots of projects. So mobility, justice, and clean transportation will change the way we get around for the better. Next slide. Transportation. Oops. Next slide. Transportation emits a lot of pollution. And we've heard about the cows, right? And all their gas and other such emissions. But 41% of greenhouse gas emissions come from our cars. 83% of smog forming emissions come from a variety of other sources. And of course, 95% of toxic diesel emissions come from transportation. Next slide, please. So California has taken a really cool approach, and we are really on the forefront of changing the way we move, and hopefully being an example to other states. And those other states would call us the land of the fruits and nuts, literally. So, as you know, they don't want the sale of any new gas-powered vehicles by 2035. The passenger vehicle ban is starting in 2035, and commercial vehicles like trucks and such will be happening between 2035 and 2045. The goal is right now is to reduce 250,000 EV, or the goal is to produce 250,000 EV charging stations by 2025. So everywhere within the state of California, every community should have access to charging stations. And there is funding available for tribes, individuals, governments, nonprofits, and communities to develop programs and to purchase buses, fleets, airport shuttles, etc. So electrification is being pushed very heavily. Next. So what does this look like? What does just transition look like? A shift of focus from the modes of transit to the experience of people using modes of transit. We need to respond to local needs and listen to community voices. There's money out there right now to do engagement with your tribal communities and to survey them and see what they're thinking about this shift and how they're going to be able to participate in changing their mode of transportation. We need to think beyond street infrastructure to make sustainable modes of transit actually work for people. And we need to use community decision-making processes. Next slide. So clean transportation options include active transportation, transit, personal vehicles, and shared vehicles. Next slide. Active transportation includes walking, biking, e-biking, bike sharing, scooting, e-scooters. Successful transportation will require good infrastructure. Now, this one always gets me to laughing. Sidewalks on the reservation. Sidewalks and bike lanes, well-lit streets, and bike and scooter sharing options available to the community. Next slide. Public transit will be buses with electric and natural gas fuel cells, and of course trains will be electric. Next slide. Oh, you get a picture of me, yay. Personal vehicles, I own a hybrid. All electric vehicles and motorcycles, plug-in hybrid cars, and hydrogen fuel cell cars. All of these things need to be affordable, practical, and need to have places where people can easily charge. Next. Shared vehicles. I really like this idea for tribes. Car sharing, where you would pay a membership or per ride, or even ride hailing. This is a picture of a gentleman who started a program in the Central Valley, where it's kind of like Uber Lyft, but not. You have to plan your rides ahead of time, but they take you to your medical visits, shopping, and they did it before there was even money available to do it. So we need to look at programs that are going to be affordable and practical, and that would work in the tribal community. Next slide. So how do we make the transition? Next slide. Is clean transportation right for me? These are the questions that we have. Like, when I bought my hybrid, I was like, where am I going to plug in? But I had already been paying attention, so I knew that plug-in options were available to me fairly close. The grocery store, what I call my Indian heaven, Walmart. So what safety concerns do you have around transportation? What public transportation is available to you? We know that it practically doesn't exist in the tribal community, and we know that car sharing options don't. And plug-in charging stations. So the state developed another program, next slide, to help people. And it's a state initiative that's not focused just to tribes, but anyone who is low income within the state of California has incentives that can help them make the switch to clean transportation. Again, all that money, the state is putting their money where their mouth is, and they want to help get you into a clean vehicle. And so there's electric vehicle grants, rebates, and loans for new, used, and leased vehicles. They have money available so that you can put a charging station in at home. And then they have vouchers for car sharing, transit, and then they have money for home solar programs. Next slide. So they created this website called accesscleanca.org. And it basically works like this. You sign on your computer, you type in all your information, it tells you what you're eligible for, and then it will send you an email with an application that you have to put in your financial information and so forth. And the next thing you know, you'd be on the road with a clean vehicle. To be transparent, I need to let you know that this process takes about 6 weeks from the time an individual applies to the time that they receive the voucher. And then longer if you get a rebate, because you are also eligible for a rebate on the vehicle that you purchased. Next slide. So all of these programs include the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program, the Driving Clean Assistance Program, which is like the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program, but it has more options for people who have not established credit or maybe have poor credit. There's the Energy for All program, and then in the Bay Area, they have other specific programs called Clean Cars for All. In the San Joaquin Valley, they have Dry Clean. In San Joaquin, there's the South Coast has the Replace Your Ride, and Sacramento area has Clean Cars for All, and then LA has Blue LA, and then there's a community car share program in Sacramento. So all of these programs are available for Californians, and many of these are incentives that an individual can receive and can stack. So you can get, let's say you can get a clean vehicle assistance voucher, you can get the Replace Your Ride, and you can get additional money for Clean Cars for All. So depending on where you live, you can get almost up to $14,000 to help you get into a clean vehicle. Pretty amazing. And I am glad to have known several people who have. So next slide. Oh, whoops, we're not going to talk about that. Next slide. So here's an example of people who have been successful. She is a woman who was a family of 3 in the Central Coast area, lives in an apartment. She leased a new EV for $35 a month because she received $11,000 in incentives, and she's using public charging. Next slide. Here's Angel. He lives in the Bay Area, and he's a family of 4, and he bought a 2013 Ford C-Max Energy and paid $8,400 after a $5,000 grant from the Driving Clean Assistance Program. And he also received a low-cost loan. So the Driving Clean Assistance Program is not only for people who have no credit or poor credit, but they also have a credit union that they work with to provide a low-cost loan for those who are found eligible. Next slide. Here's another example of a woman in Riverside who bought a 2017 Fiat battery electric vehicle. She paid $3,200 for it after a $5,000 grant from the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program. She received a $1,000 utility rebate, and now she pays about $25 a month for her fuel because she charges right at home. Next slide. So, is clean transportation right for you? Where do you need to go? Marcel, can you tell me how much time I have? I want to make sure I'm respectful.
There are 16 minutes.
Okay. So is clean transportation right for me? You need to think, where do you need to go? What safety concerns do you have around transportation? Is there public transportation available? Are there car sharing options available? Where can I charge? Do I have a car that I could trade in? And how much budget I have? And this is why I really like the Driving Clean Assistance Program, because it really helps you go over your finances in a way that you can be assured that you are going to be able to handle a car purchase. The state doesn't want to give you money to get in a car and then have it taken away from you because somebody had to take it back. So the programs are really user-friendly, I guess. And I've been fortunate to work with 2 individuals who were able to participate and get their vehicles through these programs. Next slide. Oops. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the differences. So an all-electric vehicle uses only electricity and goes about between 70 and 250 miles on one charge. And recently, the used car values are anywhere between $7,000 and $10,000 for an all-electric car. So can you imagine if you got the Clean Vehicle incentive program or the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program and you get $5,000 and then you get a $250 rebate? You are almost not paying anything for your vehicle, right? That's pretty exciting. But I need to be transparent with you that electric vehicles, while they give you this driving range, because I'm used to driving around in a tribal community, I always think of the lowest range. And part of that is, climbing up mountain roads, driving on unpaved mountain roads, using your radio, using your air conditioning, using your heaters, using your power windows. All of these things are going to be zapping the electricity from your vehicle. So you do need to be aware that while it says 70 to 250 miles, more than likely it's going to be about 70. And I remember there was a drive cleaning event at La Jolla where they took some electric vehicles up to La Jolla, which is, on top of Palomar Mountain. And the ladies were worried that their vehicles weren't going to make it because going uphill, they were using a lot of power. So next slide. So plug-in hybrid, and that's what I have. I use gas predominantly, and I plug in when it's convenient for me, which is typically not. I don't have a plug-in option at my workplace, and I don't have it where I live, so it only happens when I go to Indian Heaven, aka Walmart. So these can also get you about 100 miles. I have a Ford Fusion. It will plug in to give me 30 miles, but because I use my heat seeker, my air conditioning, and my radio blasting, I get about 8 miles on one charge. But my goal is that in 2 years, I will have a fully electric vehicle. Next slide. So hybrid vehicles are those vehicles that use only gas, and they get about 20 to 60 miles per gallon. And there's new and used models at all price points, and they don't emit. They have no emissions. So while they're fully gas, their engines are different. And I don't know enough about it to even say. So next slide. So there's all kinds of charging. Most often the one that I use is level 1, which is the one where I plug it into an outlet outside of my house. And that will take all night to give me a 30-mile charge. Then there's another option, which is level 2, which is more of a portable charging equipment that you take with you. I have that as well. And then there's the level 3, which is the fast public charging, which gives you a charge to 80% of your battery within 15 to 20 minutes. So you can see that it doesn't take a whole lot. And a lot of my friends who've traveled, you own Teslas and travel distances, they say, stopping and charging, it takes, by the time, if they have to go to the bathroom, they stop and they get something to drink and they go to the bathroom. They said you don't even notice it because it's just like gassing out. Next slide. So battery electric vehicles are the cheapest and cleanest, and you can see from this slide how it differs from a regular gas engine or a diesel engine. And you can see that the battery electric vehicles, again, are the cleanest in terms of emission. Next slide. They're also cheaper to run and cheaper to maintain because they don't have like a braking system. So it's different. I had to learn to drive differently because I needed to make sure that I was engaging my dynamic braking system, which charges my battery and reduces the amount of fuel that I'm using. So I get a higher gallons per mile. Next slide. So fully battery electric vehicles don't need oil changes. There are fewer moving parts to brake, and the battery itself only requires service after 6 or 10 years. So insurance rates can be slightly higher for EVs though. That's the only down, I guess. And of course, not all the neighborhoods have charging stations. Next slide. So here's the program that we have through our office, where we're doing the outreach to tribal community to get into a clean electric battery. And the thing that is different with going through us is that when I know that you are applying for a clean vehicle incentive, then I have access to the back door to call people and say, hey, what's taking so long? Where is your application at? Which a normal individual out there applying for the incentive would have access to none of that. Next slide. So we want you to bring clean mobility to your community. You can go, as a tribe, you can go and look for grants at california.gov, which will give you lots of funding opportunities that are out there. There's several that are coming up within the next few months. And applications will be due in January and February. Next slide. So please get your voice heard. Support mobility justice because it's happening whether we want it to or not. Next slide. And here's some ways to get involved and help your community. You can post the information to your website, that cute little card that we've tribalized to get tribal people interested. You can use that if you want. We have flyers, and you can go ahead and just purchase a battery electric vehicle. Next slide. And this is it. Here's how you can get in touch with me if you're interested in learning more. We are super excited because we've been working with Medina, which is one of our member tribes, on a shared mobility project. And I'm super excited to see what their community thinks about clean vehicles and what programs they'd like to see. And I'm sure that they're going to be a tribe that we want to watch. That's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Are there any questions? If there are any questions, please type them in the chat and I can read them out loud.
Everyone's going to go apply.
Woo! Yay!
I know I wish that I knew about this program before I purchased my hybrid. I lost out by like 6 months.
Oh, wow. Next the next vehicle purchase.
Yes, for sure. Well, thank you, Marisol, for forwarding my slides for me.
Of course. Bringing
I'm
you.
amazed that it did it on a PDF.
Yeah. I was at first, I was like, it's a PDF. And you're like, yep. I was like, okay, that works. Get through it. So we
Cool.
have.
Well, I don't think anyone has any questions, but they know how to get a hold of me if they do.
Okay. There's still a little bit over 4 minutes, but if there are no questions, I guess we could end early if you'd like, Jill, or we can stay on the line.
All right, everyone. Have a good conference.
Thank you, everyone. Please take care. Contact Jill if there are any questions.
I just saw that I've been waving to the screen. I just see that my video is off.
It is. It is. I can't see you, Jill.
Oh, well. Okay.